Let's get the last gallon of water in there. There we go. Spray this. Go with the funnel for a minute. Let's put this back up on the countertop here. And the one thing we're going to have to do real quick is give this a really good shake. You can see how much thicker possible, hopefully you can, how much thicker the honey is, and it's a lot darker on the bottom. So let's give this a good shake. This will also even the temperature out. I had 3 gallons of that water was at about 44 degrees, which is what my kegerator sits at. And the other gallon was at room temperature, and the honey was a little bit warmer from having sat in that pot of water. There we go. Just about do it. Some sanitized scissors. Take this back out. Oh, let's check the temperature first, actually. You guys will be hard for you to see, but this is sitting perfect. It's at 66 to 68 degrees. These little strips like this are fantastic when you're making wine or really anything, just to monitor fermentation, but they're great. So 66 to 68 is perfect. This wine yeast is recommended at 55 to 75 degrees. It is a wine yeast, but it is for mead. It does come from why it says mead. And my fermentation room is at 66 degrees, so we are perfect to pitch. Let's go ahead and pop our funnel back on top there. Give this a good spray. Give the scissors a spray again. Cut the corner. Get that whole thing on in there. Let that drip for just a second. Make sure we get all the yeast and the little bit of nutrient that was inside of this pack all gets inside of our must. Now, I'm going to add oxygen. You could just really shake this thing, or if you're a winemaker, you might have an attachment that goes on your drill, but you want to try and get as much oxygen as possible inside of this must, help with fermentation, and just creates a really, really healthy wort for the yeast to start eating. Doing that, your mead will peak a little bit sooner, so you won't have to wait quite as long. The alcohols and the phenols that are produced will be more mellow and in check, and your mead will be infinitely more drinkable early on. You won't have to wait a year or 2 years or 3 years. You know, you might be able to start drinking it or sampling it in 6 months or 7 months, and that's always nice. So for those of you who haven't seen one, it's an oxygen stone, okay? This happens to be I believe it's 0.2 micron, and that's just how small the holes are. I soaked this in Star San. It's been sitting there for about 20 minutes overall. I just have a quick disconnect on there. Some guys just take the whole thing off. This isn't a regular that has a gauge. It's just kind of on and off, and you just kind of feel how much O2 is actually coming out of the bottle. You pick these tanks up from pretty much any hardware store. They're only a few bucks, and they'll last you, in my experience, 4 or 5 batches. Spray the connection itself. Let's put this guy on. And because I have sanitizer inside of the line, I'm going to turn this on real quick and actually foam this out. Doesn't take but a second. Okay. Now let's get this guy inside of there. Create some bubbles. You don't want huge bubbles blowing out of this. Just small bubbles. I'm not even sure if you guys can actually see that on the camera, but I've got just a little ripple at the top, and I can see some very small bubbles just penetrating the sides here. Do this for about 60 seconds or so. Great time to finish off this glass of Hyman. The other thing that's nice about Mead is that the temperature of the yeast that you use isn't as critical as with beer. So if you've got a warmer basement in the summertime, you can typically find a wine yeast that's suitable for fermentation at that temperature. Nothing really over 80 degrees, but 75 and below, you're fine. And I think that's great because some of us, it's like, oh man, my basement's 75 degrees. I've already done all the Hefeweizen I want to make, and I'm not really interested in doing more Saison. So what can I do? Make yourself some Mead. It's a fantastic way to keep your carboys in use and keep things fermenting. And if they come out great, wine drinkers love them, and beer guys and gals tend to really like Mead as well. As a matter of fact, it's kind of the beer world that's kept Mead as popular as it continues to grow. It kind of was dying off as a beverage for a little while, and the home brewers have really kind of revived it being an important thing in society, an important thing to drink, and something that's worth making. It's not really been the wine world for that. So I've just got water here. I'm going to go ahead and just set that in there. That way all the sugar will just dissolve off of that. Every time I use that, I take the stone off and I boil it, and that's to make sure that anything that has gotten into the tiny little holes that's on the stone itself will be boiled out and killed, and it'll actually be sterile. An assembly like that's about $40 or so in these tanks, who are somewhere, depends on where you live, but somewhere between 7 and 12 bucks a piece. All right. So we've aerated, we've added nutrient, we've made our must, airlock is on, give it one good stir, just for good measure. And that's it, everyone. This is mead making, or at least how I make mead. Like I was saying, as a disclaimer, I'm not an expert mead maker. I have read some books on the subject, and I just follow what I've found to be kind of truthful. It's one of those things that there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat, and the way in which you choose to skin it is really up to you. As long as you're sanitary, using good quality honey. I can't wholeheartedly recommend buying the $1.99 value supermarket bee honey. That's an overly blended honey. It's intended more for baking, and while it will get you drunk, in my experience, the flavor profiles of meads made with that aren't really what you would call the highest quality. But if you want to experiment with it and just go through the process of it and make something inexpensive, then yeah, definitely, you know, go for it. Any way that you want to try and do this, I have to say, you know, it's worth it. So get out there, get some honey, get some good water, a good pack of yeast, toss it in a jug, and when this is ready to rack, I'll do another video on that when it's ready to bottle, and hopefully in 6 months we can do some tasting notes on it, and hopefully in a year we can do another set of tasting notes on it, and I'll tell you guys how this came out. So that's pretty much it for me. The last thing that I have to say, if you are interested in the type of honey that I used, you can get that from wineandbeermaking.com. That's the website for St. Louis Wine and Beer Making, which is my local homebrew shop where I picked that honey up. And it's native to a beekeeper that lives not but 10 or 15 miles from my house. So very local and very awesome to be able to support him and make a really good high quality beverage out of what he does for his joy. So thanks for tuning in, everyone. I'm out of here. I will see you all on the next video. Cheers.